Alright, so everything's been face joined and resawn. I'm going to give you guys a little talk up here, alright, about milling lumber. I've been doing this lately, and I'm hoping that I'll remember when I go home to put a link to some videos, at least one, where I explain milling lumber for heirloom quality furniture, because it's important. And we're lucky today because we have a top that was glued up that I bought yesterday that's not flat. I'm going to show it to you. I'm going to show you what the issues with it are. And I'm not picking on the guys that glued it up or anything like that. Not at all. But it's a great way to demonstrate what not to do and why, and reinforce why I do the things the way I do them and my history with it and all of it. All right. Now in this case here, this top is dictating the style for this piece. So there's going to be a little rustic nature to it. And what that means is when I milled this, you can see here, there's still some milling marks. This is from, and you can see these are kind of curved here. So what you have is, like, that was a giant. That curve right there tells me that this blade, this could have been like a 4-foot diameter circular saw blade where it went through the mill originally for its initial milling. So when I face joined these sides here, that was all done on this machine here, on the Inca 590 joiner planer. So I flattened one side first, and I went ahead and I left some of that. All right. Then I resawed it. Just grab this one here. So the other side of these right now look like this. Now what I'll end up doing here is tomorrow when I come back, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run this side here through the face, you know, through the joiner again, because these are all going to move a little bit overnight. And then I'll flip them over and I'll run them through the planer. Now on these parts, these are the parts for the trestle base. I'll show you a sketch in a moment and explain it to you. So these parts don't need to be super precise and exact to one another because I'm not gluing them together. When you're gluing a top together, that's a different thing. That's where you need to be. You should take several days. This is just my opinion, but I'm going to back it up. You should take the time over days or a week or more milling your parts to glue up a top, because you can mill out the movement. None of my tables move. I've been making tables for over 30 years. I have never seen one warp totally out of whack, ever. And so I want to explain why. I'm going to show you what's going on with this one. This here, you guys might remember when I was buying the boards, there was a crack in one. This is the board. Well, this is a nice happy accident, because now this piece here, that's going to be our beam for the trestle. This side's nice and flat. This side here, a little bit better looking, I think. But this is just, I have to smooth this out. I have to run it through the planer. But again, tomorrow, and I'll put this down, I believe. That's what I'll do when I put it in. What am I talking about? I'm talking about, should have had this set up for you already. I'm talking about this drawing here. So this piece here, which is upside down, right there, is going to be this beam right here. Okay? Then you come over here, these two parts here are going to be the posts. What are the posts? Well, these are the posts on the trestle bases, these verticals right here, this one and that one. Right? These two parts here are going to be the feet. And when it comes to these four pieces here, these two were cut from one board, these two were cut from one board. And I haven't decided which is going to be which, but two of these are going to either be, it's probably going to be these two right here, are going to be the breadboard edges, right there. And then these two parts here are going to end up being the top of the trestle base. So, let's grab a pencil here. Let me get you back over to the tabletop, and I'll try to explain it a little bit better for you. I'll try. I'm probably not the greatest at it, I don't know. Basically, your trestle base, right, it's going to look something more like this. You're trying to draw around. I'm actually sticking my arm through the tripod right now. So your posts are vertical, and they won't be very long, by the way. And then your your foot comes down. And then I'll have those little pad feet and purple heart. You want the pad feet, you could shape this foot with an arc on it. But in this case, I'm going to add these little pad feet, and that'll give us 4 points of contact with the table, and that allows the table to remain stable when you set it down someplace. So those two parts you just saw will be these two parts up here. All right. This piece is what this piece is. You just can't see it in the sketch because obviously the tabletop is obscuring that. Okay. Now, we're going to talk about this top here. And I'm going to show you how out of whack it is. And just bear with me. Okay, so here's our dilemma. See the light coming out from there? The center of this tabletop has a pretty major sag. It's a solid 1/8 of an inch here, at least. And that's not good. Now, as I was looking at this, I noticed, do you see this right here? This is the center of a tree. This is not what you want. You should never do this. You should never glue. You see it right here too? Right there? This is the center of the tree. That's the weakest board. You really never want to use that board for a tabletop. You want to rip this board. You never want to keep it like that. And so what you can see up top here, right here, matter of fact, listen to this. You can hear this now. Don't worry, this is not the end of the world. I'm going to fix all of this. I'm going to use it to my advantage. But listen. Hear this? This is separated here. That's not good. I've got that in a few places on the tabletop. Now there's a split here. This split goes in all the way over here to the void in the table, which the client loves. The client loves this hole. We're going to keep this hole. By the way, I have an idea for this, which is going to be kind of neat. I hope she digs on it. It's not something that has to be permanent, but I'm not going to mention it right now. It's going to be a surprise. Most people these days, they would do the epoxy thing. All right, that's just what they would do. And I'm not an epoxy guy. That's a crafty thing. I'm not knocking it. You could easily do that. I could do that. I don't own the stuff. I could get it. It's just messy and smelly and all that other good stuff. I just would prefer to avoid it. But she likes the hole, so we don't have to worry about that. Now, the board next to it, and actually, if you run your hand, oh yeah, right here. I'm getting that tap right here too, so it's lifting here. You see right here, right across here, that is not good. Same thing, that's the center of a tree right there. Center of the tree right here. Look at the split right here. So, and I know I got a couple other spots right here that's lifting. So I got to deal with that. Now, normally, when I glue a top up, I would never do this. I would never glue this top up with these voids that we're seeing. I just would never in a million years do this. I think these were left over, and my pal just decided to go ahead and make this glue up, figuring that it was cool to have the voids. And it is. It looks cool. But these two boards, if I were to move this tabletop over to where the edge of my work surface was in line with the center of this board, if I lifted this table up and dropped it, this table would snap right in half at that seam. It would definitely do it on this board, 100%. That's why I don't like doing that sort of thing. So, what I'm going to do is, well, I contacted him. He said, don't worry, just bring it over. They've got a big machine there now, a big sander, so we'll be able to run it through the sander and flatten it out. But before I bring that over, I'm going to do whatever I want to do to this top. Now, I'm going to do some filling. A couple spots, I'm going to do some Dutchman patches where I think I should do them, where it's appropriate. And then I'm going to add some little butterflies in like this crack right here, and on this other side here, right in here. I'm going to put some little, and I'm going to hand cut all of these. I'm not going to do them like I normally do, where they're all the same. I'm going to make them all different. but they will all be, I think I'll just use Purple Heart for everything. I'm going to put, you know, a couple here, stitch this seam together. You know, I'll put a couple here, boom, boom, right? And I'll probably do a Dutchman patch right here because you really don't want this right where somebody's sitting. So I'll do a Dutchman patch here. Maybe I'll do a Dutchman patch here. I'm sorry, you're off camera. And a butterfly there or something. I'll figure it out. But typically, what would have happened here if I had done this is these boards would not have had any of the voids, and I would put where the boards meet, I'd put butterfly mortises, because the butterfly mortise, in case you don't know what that is, I forget sometimes. This happens to be a mahogany, an African mahogany. This is a butterfly mortise shaped like a bow tie. So what this is it's two opposing triangles, right? And you put that in there, and now these two boards cannot separate. So it becomes a mechanical fastener. I'm going to make smaller ones in Purple Heart to place around this top. I'm not worried about putting them on the seams to hold the top together because I'm doing the breadboard edge. Now, you've seen it already on the drawing. So what's going to happen is on the end here, there's going to be, and maybe I should sketch it for you, but on the end here, I'm going to create a tenon. I'm going to step this in here, cut it here. I'm going to do a straight cut line across here on both sides and remove the material, but I'm going to leave a piece here that's probably going to be, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch, 7/8 of an inch, something like that thick. The whole length of this. And then on this piece here, on this edge, starting from here, I'm going to cut a slot. It's going to go the whole length of the board, but it'll stop before you get to the end. And then that piece, it'll be a long slot mortise, will slip right over that tenon. And then to hold that in place, I'm going to put some pegs. I'm going to drill through and I'll put pegs through the breadboard edge, through the tenon that's here, and it can't go anywhere. And that piece will effectively hold this entire table together. It can't separate at that point. That's why I don't need butterflies to hold the boards together. Of course, I'm sure they use Type-On 2 glue and everything anyhow. So, now look. I've talked about this before ad nauseum. You're seeing it here. Right? You're seeing the warp here. If I would have glued this table together, it would not have warped. And the reason is, what happens if you try to have a place mill the lumber for you, they're not going to take the time to do it the way you would do it yourself if you had the ability, if you had the machines and everything. I have the machines and I taught myself this. This is not something that took me 30 plus years to learn how to do. This is something I learned how to do right in the beginning. Matter of fact, I think the guy who glued this up is the same guy that made me realize I had to learn how to do this myself. And I'm not picking on him or the place. I love this place. But early on, I had him mill some things for me, and they looks great when you pick it up. And it's smooth and everything. But then I'd get to the shop, and even though it was what you'd call S4S, right? All the sides are flat and apparently square. Maybe if you put a square on it, it'll appear to be square. But when you take the board and you put it down on a flat surface, it's got a twist to it, or a bow to it, or it's cupped. And I couldn't understand, dude, what am I paying for? I still have to mill this now to get it right, for me to use it in furniture and do joinery. You can't glue boards together like that. The reason for it is, at the time, they weren't face joining. I knew that. I learned that. They were just running through the joiner, flipping it over, running it through, or running through the planer, flipping it over, running it through, making it smooth. I'm telling you right now, you have to take every one of your, if you're going to glue up a tabletop, you've got to take your boards and you have to face join every single one of those boards, meaning you run it through that joiner until it's perfectly flat. And you're going to tip it up on end, and you're going to get a 90-degree, perfect 90-degree edge. Of course, I got everything on top of everything here, so I can't grab it fast enough for you, but basically you're going to have this going on, right? So this is perfectly flat. This is perfectly 90 degrees right here. Right? I tipped that, I ran this through the joiner, then I put this up against the fence, and I ran it through, and this is perfectly 90 degrees. Then you're going to take this piece, and just like this, you're going to run it through your bandsaw, and you're going to re-saw it. That's what you see here. This is not the best example, because it didn't, this is a little thinner than a lot of the other boards. This is a little bit better for you. So then you're going to run it through the bandsaw. It's going to look like this. All right. Now, you're going to let this sit overnight. Just like I said at the beginning of this video. It's going to sit overnight. When I come back here tomorrow and I put some pencil lines on this and I run it through that machine, it's a pretty good chance you're going to see some pencil lines because this board will have twisted a little bit or moved a little bit just overnight. If you're really nervous about it, I believe the thinner the wood is, the more you need to take your time with it. The thicker it is, technically, the less it tends to move. What this tells me, that this is so warped, and it's only, he told me it was only like 2 months ago that he glued this up. The fact that it warped that quick tells me that likely these boards were milled and glued together in one day. And that's absolutely the worst thing that you could do because this is the result. And you can't have that. Now, if you're making it for yourself, or if you're not charging a lot of money for your work, that's fine. But I charge for my time. And I can't have somebody coming back to me and telling me that their dining room table is like a Super Bowl now. That's unacceptable. If I'm putting my brand on it, 100% unacceptable. So I just can't have that. So that's why I take my time with the milling process, because I know it's going to remain stable. So that's what you do. You run these through, you come back the next day, you run them through again, then you can run them through the planer, and they're probably at that point now going to remain stable. So if you're going to a place, any lumber yard, and you're asking them to mill or do a glue up for you, you can almost guarantee that that top, unless they're doing it the way I'm doing it, and most of them are not going to do it. Most of them are not. It's weird to me. And I learned this very early on. There's guys you can work with that have been doing something. Like when I first started, right when I got out of the service, I was pretty young still. I was just under 21 years old. And I was working with these guys that were in their 60s. And they've been doing this their whole lives. This is when we were building houses. And they were talking crap to us all the time and goofing on us young guys. We don't know anything. You got to do it this way. And they were really, it was more of like, do as I say, not as I do shit. You know, that's basically what it was. But then as I got more into it, and I was a high-end framer. I framed a lot of houses, did the whole interiors, finish work. I did every aspect of construction and carpentry there is before I was 25 years old, just in that short amount of time. It was pretty crazy the amount of work that I did. I had already built some furniture at that point, built my own waterbed, was doing kitchen cabinets. I worked in a couple cabinet shops. I know what I'm talking about. So, you know, a shop like our lumber yard, they don't have that kind of time. That's all I'm saying. If they could take the time to face joint it, edge it, resaw it, and let it sit, and it'd be better if they let it sit for a couple days, came back, reface jointed it again, re-edged it again, then ran it through the planer, then did a glue up, then they're going to have something that remains stable. But how much time does that take? How are they going to charge you for that? It's almost impossible. So it's what I see. It's what I've always seen. Now, I told this story before. Let me adjust this camera. It looks like I'm bending down too far. Try to get the right angle for you here so I'm comfortable. So there's a place, I forgot to look it up. I meant to look it up before I started this video. It's called Petersen Antiques. Petersen, S-E-N. And they're out here. I believe they've been in business since like 1986, if I'm not mistaken. Now, this was a guy, he contacted me. I don't know how he found out about me. I think it was one of those online things, like Nextdoor, something like that maybe, because this is in my neighborhood. And he wanted me to come in and meet his wife. It was really an interesting situation. I don't want to, you know, she had been a model at one time, beautiful lady. He was an older guy, and I should look into them. I don't know if he's around anymore, because this was a little while ago. And we had this great phone conversation. During the phone conversation, he tried to hire me to work for him just based on how I was speaking, because he knew I knew what I was talking about. Then I sent him pictures, And he sent me back a thing saying, I think you're overqualified. But he wanted me to go meet his wife. She wanted all these custom built-ins done and everything else. So I went to their house, and we sat down. We went through the house, talked about what we were going to do, and then we got a little meeting about it. And they had this dining room table. And I walk in, and I put my hand on the table. And when I put my hand on the table, the whole table moved. And I went, whoa, and I looked at it, and I could see that the table was warped. And he was sitting right there. And I had this look on my face. He goes, well, all tables do that. And I looked right at him. I said, well, mine don't. None of my tables have ever moved. Certainly not like that. And then his wife chimed in, because she's part of the business. And she was very open about it. She said, well, yeah, we have a problem. We have these complaints from time to time where people are telling us our tables are warping. I said, well, that's because you're not milling your lumber correctly. And he's looking at me like, what? Now, this guy's been in business since 1986. I encourage you to go to their website, because he's got tables on there. I don't even know. At that time, he had a table that was $38,000. And I'm sure that they do unique pieces, but for the most, every piece they make is unique, right? Everyone's going to be one of a kind, but they have a catalog. And it's a great place, by the way. They reproduce vintage pieces of furniture, like classic styles, classic tables that have been around, some of them for hundreds of years, shaker style tables, European, French, country influence stuff, all of it. And I think at that time the most expensive one, and by the way, I think the least expensive that they had was around $8,000 to $10,000 at the time. I could be mistaken, but I'm pretty certain that's about what it is. And I told him, I said, well, dude, here's what you need to do is you hire one guy that mills your lumber, and he does a preliminary milling. So he takes all your boards when you get them in, and all he does is face join every board, straight line one edge, run it through the bandsaw and resaw it, and then stack it. So if you had one guy and that's all his job was, because the way his place works is, I'm the guy building the table, I go up, I take the order sheet, I check it out, I go select the lumber, I pull all the boards, I mill them, I build the table. That's why he's having a problem. If he had a guy doing what I'm talking about, and did the preliminary milling first, we got every board just like this, face joined, edged, resawn, stacked. Now those boards are going to sit and they're going to stabilize. They're going to move a little bit, right? But now the guy who's going to build the table can come along, because that wood could be sitting there for months or a week or more. Now he could come and take it. He can re-face join it. If you need to re-edge it, run it through the planer, and now that sucker's not going to move anymore. You understand what I'm saying? That's the way to do it. Now, I don't know if he has implemented this plan of mine. This guy is one of those guys that blew a lot of smoke up my ass. Kind of tickles a little. So, I'm just saying, you know, if you got a business and you're making tables, this is something you need to be listening to me about. And you need to pick your lumber right for your tops. You never, ever, ever should you have a board that has the center of the, again, with this it's not going to matter because I'm going to fix it. Now, what's going to happen is, the guy this was glued up for, who works there, he's a pal of mine, he's awesome. Don't take this the wrong way, Ryan. I'm going to put my butterflies in and do all the stuff I want to do. I haven't decided if I want to put the breadboard on yet. My reasoning is I'm going to bring this back to them, and I'm going to ask him if he'll do it the way I ask him to do it. I hope that they'll do it this way. Right now, this is the top up, and it's doing this. I want, once I do my work to this, and I'll come in with a scraper or something and get whatever I put on relatively flat, I want them to run this upside down, so the hump is doing this, and I want them to run that through their sander until the bottom of this is perfectly flat. Then I want to turn it over and sand the top, because then the sander will be hitting the outside edges, and as it passes through, it'll get flatter. You know, as we get to the center, it'll take a few passes. And the thing about that is that the sanding marks go in this direction. So if I've got a breadboard edge here and this grain is going in this direction, you know, I don't want, I don't know if you guys can see that. You can get what I'm talking about. So then that's not the right piece, doesn't really matter. So this is the Mike Z, this is the Pro Mike Z show, right? We've been through this before. I'm so pro. So when the breadboard edge goes on, this would not be the upside. Well, that might be the upside, but that'll be on here. So you guys can see, actually you might be able to see right here. I'm holding this flush to the corners. You could probably see how high that comes in the center right there. And you can see that's a solid 1/8 of an inch at the center. That's not going to work for me. That might work for a lot of other people. It's not going to work for me. So when the breadboard edge is affixed to this end, I don't want the sanding marks going across the grain here. So my thought process is do what I'm going to do to this, bring it to them, have them sand this out, and then I'll come back. Then I'll do my tenon and my mortise, and then I'll put my breadboard edges on, and then I'll sand this whole thing out and do the process of finishing. So that's it. That's just what I wanted to talk to you about. I really wanted to, it's great that I got this because it gave me an opportunity to show you what happens if you don't do things correctly. Now, warping, you could do it where when you glue it up, your surface already has a cup to it. Now, if that happens, typically, now that's assuming, never assume, because when you do, you make an ass out of you and me. But when you assume, you do that. But assuming that, you know, they milled every one of these boards flat, and then they tipped it up on end, and they ripped the edges perfectly to 90 degrees, if that's what they would have done, then it would be flat when they glued it up, and the reason it cupped is that these boards all moved. And these two boards in particular, they're effed. They're totally effed up because we know that the center was a tree. So that's just not stable. That's always going to be a problem and move on you. If you had a bunch of boards that you had no choice, all you had were these boards where you could see the center of the tree, my advice would be to split them down the middle and then take as much material that you can take off from there off. So you might take a whole inch out of the center of this board, and you'd have a bunch of skinny boards, but then when you glued all that up, you'd have something way more stable that would be less likely to move. So when you keep your boards wider, even if this isn't the center of a tree, you're more likely to have a situation where the thing is going to warp. That's just the nature of wood. But sometimes what can happen is you mill your boards, and when you did your 90 degrees, it wasn't 90 degrees. Like when I do this, I check it all the way down the board with my square, and I make sure that that's perfect and that this is razor sharp, because when I glue it up, I don't want there to be a void there. If this angle is not exactly 90 degrees, I don't care if it's off a degree. If two of them are off a degree and you glue them together, you automatically have a cup now. So you really have to be precise about this stuff. Again, you know, look, I'm talking about heirloom quality furniture here. I'm talking about high-end stuff. I'm talking about the things where people are paying $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. They don't want their shit moving. You know what I'm saying? Now, if the piece is a rustic piece, that gives you, like right now, technically I don't have to do anything to this, really. But because I'm fitting a breadboard, I don't want this lady to call me one day and go, you know, Mike, I put something on the table and it rolled into the center. I don't want to hear that. So that's why this is going to get flat. But if this was just like some farm table, rustic thing made out of pine, you know, softer wood that moves anyhow naturally over time. Walnut doesn't technically move as much because it's a hardwood. That's different, you know. But I also think that if you're making stuff out of, and I also misspoke because I was just about to talk about money here. If you're buying pine, maybe it's southern yellow pine, because that would work, I guess, for a table because it's a little bit harder. But if you're using softer woods and you're doing something that's going to be rustic in nature anyhow, and it doesn't matter, and things could be wonky, first of all, you're probably not charging a lot of money for that. Somebody's probably not going to pay as much money for that, I mean, unless they're buying it from Peterson Antique. Because when you see that, you're going to be like, what? More power to him, man. It's capitalism. Do it. Capitalize on that. He's got overhead, you know. But I wanted to mention, yesterday in the truck when I was driving, I mentioned that the lumber, if I picked it from, because this was all made from like leftover stuff from piles that were messed up. But, you know, obviously they have better quality walnut there. If I would have bought that for this, I said it would have been $1,500. I was only talking about the base. I wasn't including the top because this top I already had this. Really, if I was picking lumber for this table out of the top quality walnut in 8/4, you know, it's over 2 inches thick in the rough, it would have been more like $2,500 to $3,000 in that range for the lumber for this piece. So you can see what that means as far as like, how do you charge for that? How do you make enough money with the whole process that it takes to mill the lumber? And I'm only talking about it like this because when I got into this, I kind of got into it because I was just a natural at it anyhow, and people were asking me to build things. But at one point in the 90s, I had already been building some stuff, and I got into the film business, and I was working on movies. And I blew my ankle out on a film. I mentioned it before. In between surgeries, when I could walk, I was doing stuff. And I taught myself through magazines how to build stuff, like as far as high-end furniture. And one of the things I was doing is I was reading Fine Woodworking magazine, I think was the big one. And that's how I got turned on to all these builders. Sam Maloof, James Krenov, George Nakashima. These are the guys I kind of would idolize, right? They're living the life that I want to live. They're just making high-end pieces of furniture. So a girlfriend I had at the time actually grew up around the corner from Sam Maloof, so she'd hang out in his shop, and that was interesting. I drove up to Mendocino County, Fort Bragg, and I met James Krenov. I tried to get into his College of the Redwoods up there to learn how to build furniture. And I submitted a packet and everything. It was funny, man. He was wearing the exact same shirt that he wears on the cover of Fine Woodworking magazine. And he was really a little guy, really soft-spoken, just such a nice guy. It was such a pleasure to meet him. And they sent me a nice letter back. I probably have it somewhere. So what they do is they get, I think they accept something like 15 people a year. I don't remember what the numbers are, but I think that's right. And something like 300 people per position apply every year. And they look at your packet, because I send them pictures of what I do, talk about myself, this whole thing you got to do, this process. And then they take the ones that pass the initial, and they put your names in a hat, and they draw your names from the hat. At least that's how they explained it to me. At least that's how it sounded in the letter, because when I got the letter back from them, it said, we didn't pull you from the hat. You made that cut to get in the hat. If you apply again next year, we'll accept you. And I couldn't do it. Like at that time, I had just was recovering, and I got a settlement because I got hurt on a show, and I had like $40,000 or something, or 30,000, I don't remember, in that range. And I thought, well, that would be perfect because I could go up there and go to school better part of a year or more, and I have the money to do it. A year from now, I won't have that money, and I didn't. Now, interesting thing that happened was that this should be a Sunday night chat. Should I just stop talking? Just do it for Sunday? Just blow it? Okay, I'll finish it up. So, because I'm self-taught, I'm not locked into any specific style. I've come up with my own style. I taught myself how to do butterfly Morrises and everything else. What that means is that each piece I make can be more unique, and I'm freer to gamble and take chances with design. And I've proven to myself that my concepts, my design aesthetic, and my engineering principles in my pieces are sound. I know that they work. I can't even have an idea if it doesn't work. I've been doing this shit too long. If I have an idea, it's going to work. If I sketch it out for you, and I say, it's going to work. Just trust me. Now, at the time, I was so into this that when I looked at other woodworking magazines or any other woodworking magazines or whatever it was, because there's the Bennett Street School, I think it's called, on the East Coast. There's a couple places around the country where you can go to school and learn how to build furniture. The problem with it is you end up building furniture for the rest of your life the way that you were taught. So I can look at pieces and I can go, oh, this guy went to the College of the Redwoods. You hear what I'm saying? Now, I'm not saying that that's a negative. I'm just saying that's what jumped out at me. That's all I'm saying. So in the end, this will be fine. This is going to be what it is. The breadboard edges are going to hold this together so it can't bust. I'm going to put my butterfly Morrises in to do the job that they will be intended to do. I'm going to put some patches in where I believe they should be. I'm going to keep this silly hole here. And I'm going to do something funky with this that I hope we're cool with. And like I said, I'll plug this on the ends like with a butterfly mortise to want to keep that from splitting anymore. And in the end, this is going to look awesome. But as I was saying earlier, I'm actually happy that this top has the issues that it has, because I was able to show you the issues and explain to you why it happened and why my tops, when I do my glue ups, never do that. And if you're gonna do this, maybe this will be the title, you know, advice for aspiring furniture builders. It's, you know, what I'm talking about mostly applies to gluing up tops or any kind of panel that you're gluing up with solid wood. You have to take these things into consideration and be patient. Take your time. Do not be in a rush. Get it right so it doesn't move anymore. When you're making the other parts I'm making, the trestle base, it doesn't matter as much. Each one of those pieces, I'm still going to do the same process, so they're not going to move. But, you know, and they have to be precise. Everything has to be flat, parallel, square, 90 degrees, so that when I do my joinery and put things together, everything's perfect. And it will be. It's going to be friggin' perfect. This table in particular is going to be imperfectly perfect, because it has all these issues to it, and we're keeping them in it. It's not what I normally do. I'm kind of happy to be doing it in a way, because it's interesting to me. Now, I should be able to knock it out quicker, which is why my client's getting the deal she's getting. Anyhow, that's it. I can't really do much work on these today because they have to stabilize overnight, which really means they have to move overnight. And then tomorrow I might do another video. I might not. It really just depends. Probably won't do any videos again until I'm working on this, which could be today. I mean, I've got plenty of time left today. I could maybe make some of my butterflies. I'm going to map this out right now, I think, is what I'm going to do next, and decide where I want to put some Dutchman patches. All that is putting a piece of wood in any shape I make it, usually has straight lines or right angles, over voids in wood that you don't want to have there anymore. It's like you create a puzzle piece and then you set it in and it's flush with the surface. This is going to have a few of those. Plus, it'll look cool. It'll look cool to have this. It'll look cool to have a couple Dutchman patches. It'll look cool to have a few little tiny butterfly mortises here and there. It'll look cool. It's got to be cool, man. If it ain't cool, it ain't Mike Z Design. You know what I'm saying? It's gonna be the tagline for this video. So with the breadboard edges, and when I put the pins in, they're gonna be square, but I'm gonna twist them so they look like little diamonds, and I'm gonna have 4 pins in each end. And I'm not, don't hold me to this, Patricia, if you're watching, but when I do my, let's just say, let's say this was the foot, which it's not, and let's say this was the post, which it's not. I would do a 10 in here, I'm doing mortise here, and this is going to sit here. And by the way, I think I'm going to make the post narrower than the foot, just a little bit, so you'll see a little shoulder across here. So the tenon will be going through here, and what I may do, I probably won't do this, but what I might do if my time is going well, I might go ahead and put 2 pegs here and orient them to look like diamonds here and at the other end, because they'll match the breadboard edge top. But again, I have to be careful about the details. Adding the detail, just like I said yesterday when I said curves cost money in all aspects of life. You know how true that is, fellas. Hey, ladies, in case you don't get it, you get it right now, don't you? You know what I'm saying. You ladies cost us some money. So, I'm just saying, it's curves and these little details, that's what takes the time. Time is money, and that's why things cost what they cost, right? This is your durr moment of the video, but that's just how it is. Not complaining, just pointing it out. You could sit down with me if you had the budget, you know, and you were like, I want one of your tables, and I want you to pull out all the stops, and I want the boat shaped and the breadboard. If I don't do Boy, I wish I had the ability. I'm just not the guy with the video stuff, with the editing and everything. You guys know that by now. But if I do, I've done it before. I've done boat-shaped tables, and on the end I did not put a breadboard edge, so you could see the end grain like you can on this. And you guys can see this, the Mike Z Design Facebook page. Go there, go to photos, go to albums, and you'll see island tops I've done, some tables. By the way, that Facebook page does not have everything I've ever done, but it's got a lot. I mean, it could take you a long time to go through every picture folder there. Some of those picture folders have hundreds of images of the construction process that I went through to create those pieces. So I've done everything. I've done what's a spline. A spline is like when you put your two boards together, you cut a groove and you put a piece of wood in there. And then when you look on the end grain, you can see that piece of wood. I've also faked splines, which are perfectly acceptable. You do your glue up, and then you could take like a router bit, make a jig, however you want to do it, and put a slot in the end right here. And you can make it pretty deep. You can make it 2 inches deep if you want. Then you cut a nice piece of hardwood, maybe contrasting color, and just tap that in place and then shape it with you can make it flush, or you could shape it with a chisel so it protrudes, but it's chamfered, faceted, you could call that. I've done it all. I've done Charles Rolfe's pieces. I'm going to show you something right now. I wasn't going to do this, but hang on. All right, so, this video is not really, I didn't intend this to be all about, like, this is how good I am, but this is how good I am. This is a reproduction piece of a Charles Rolfe's rocking footstool. This is an exact replica. The thing about it is, he never worked in mahogany. This is African mahogany. That's why it's got that nice, rich color to it. He worked in quarter sawn white oak. And just interesting story for you here. I wanted to get into showing you this first. These are faceted dowel pins here. Exactly how he did them. So I ended up counterfeiting furniture for a while. Now, sounds terrible to put it that way. This could be a Sunday night chat. I guess that's what we're doing right now here. There's a guy, I'm still friends with him. I don't know how much of his background I should really tell you, but he was a type of doctor for a while. And he got himself into antiques, and he had a store on the west side, and then he opened a location here for a short period of time, and he had a lot of Tiffany lamps, a lot of I can't think of all the names of the different companies, but turn of the century into the early part of the 20th century, there were these companies doing, craftsman style furniture, and the Tiffany lamps. There's one that starts with an H. As far as the furniture, you got Roycroft, Stickley, stuff like that. And he dealt in the original pieces. Now, this guy went to school to learn how to make Tiffany lamps. I'm pretty certain now he was probably also forging them, like making ones and making them so realistic that he was putting them off as the real pieces. And I say that because he asked me to make some Charles Rolfe's pieces. And he supplied me with the wood. Wood that was over 100 years old, quarter sawn oak, coming out of old barns and such, I suppose. And I'd make the pieces, and he'd have his other guy finish them. Now, a couple interesting things happened. For one thing, I was trying to make a deal with him to put my furniture in his place, and he wouldn't take it. This is the irony. I'm pretty certain he was forging pieces, but at the same time, he wouldn't take my pieces because they weren't vintage. They would have worked in his place. But we did do a deal at one point because there's no such thing as a Stickley coffee table. You could buy one, but when Stickley was making furniture, they never made a coffee table. No mission-style furniture company from the period, 1940s or earlier, never made a coffee tables didn't exist. Coffee tables came about because of the TV age. So if you see somebody selling a coffee table and they're telling you that's a Roycroft, like an original, or Stickley, or any of these old builders, Charles Rolfes, whatever, that's not real, because they didn't exist. Unless it was a real table and they cut the legs off to make it coffee table height. So we talked about it, and I did a series of coffee tables for him where I did some, boy, it's hard for, my influence were Roycroft and something else. I did the little mouse hole cutout on the bottoms. And so they had elements of several different makers of the period, and they were in quarter sawn white oak, and then he would finish them to the client's desire. Those were not forgeries. He wasn't doing it. He was being honest about those pieces. But he asked me to make these. I did a bunch of Charles Rolfes. Now, by the way, on this piece, this was something that was for sale on eBay for like $7,000, this piece. And it was a bunch of pictures of it and the dimensions. And from those pictures, dimensions, I made an exact reproduction. And I made it exactly the way it would have been made at the time. All the parts, everything. And I have the templates for this. I can make this again. I sold a couple of these for about $1,800 back in the day when I was making these. This is the last one I have. It's obviously, this top is not upholstered. It's supposed to be upholstered. So, really neat. You sit on your chair, you put your feet up, and this adjusts the angle to be comfortable. Rocking footstool. Now, he also had me make a log holder for him, which was really wild. And I have a scroll saw up here. He bought me top of the line scroll saw so I can duplicate this piece for him. Again, Mike Z Design, Facebook page, photos, albums. You'll find the picture folders on all this stuff. And I made a bunch of these, man. It looks like an open book. It's got it looks like a mustache, like the way, all the crazy filigree, the way all the scroll work, and the way I did all the faceted dowels. I did it exact. You can't tell. He even got reproduction. I got them right here. Walking away from the camera again. Right here are, so I kept these. Sorry, I'm off camera here. These are the original nails, types of nails that held the copper in place on the log holder. He had imitation ones made to match. So I had to hammer all these in to the copper to hold it in place. And after I made those, I had already made these for him. He had a Charles Rolfes brand he brought to me and asked me to brand the pieces. And when he did that, I balked. I was like, whoa, that's counterfeit. You're counterfeit. I'm not going to do that. If I do that, I feel like I'm breaking the law. So I won't do that. And that was when I put everything together. Because up to that point, I thought he was just having me make these pieces for like a one special client that was willing to pay for that piece, knowing it was a reproduction. But then I put it all together, and then I was looking at his lamps, and I thought to myself, holy cow, I think this guy's kind of just... He happens to... And by the way, I really like the guy. I still like the guy. He's still a friend, and he makes a lot of money. He does very well for himself. I don't think he's doing this stuff anymore. But he does come from a town known for, some family business, we'll just say. So, yeah, pretty wild story there. But I can literally, if you give me photographs and the dimensions, I will study that, and I will make you a piece where you won't be able to tell. You won't be able to tell the difference between what I make and what the old one is. I can do that. So, and I was doing that. This was, well, let me think for a second here. This would have been about 15 years ago, in that range. It's probably about, this thing's been sitting up there for probably 15 years. That's how much dust was on it. Anyhow, that's the story. Hope you guys enjoyed that. This is a crazy video, huh? This should have been a Sunday night chat video, shouldn't it? Really, I just wanted to talk about milling lumber properly. This is not supposed to be about giving anybody grief over the way that this table warped. My buddy said, oh, it's flat. I checked it. And so I believed him. You saw it. But it's okay. It's all going to work out. And he'll sand it for nothing, I'm sure. And... use your knees, not your back. And So that's all I'm saying. It's going to be fine. We'll sand this out. We'll get the cool stuff done to it. I hope you enjoyed that story. I know it was a little much maybe, but it's all true. And there's the piece to prove it. It's the last one I got. This is pretty cool, man. I should upholster this with a piece of leather and try to sell that. This is where, you know, I don't know what I'd sell that for, but I wouldn't sell it for $500. I'll tell you that much. I'll leave you guys with that. Have a great day. Be kind to one another. Come back again. Tell your friends. I'll catch you on the next one.